The owl who stole the sun's secret. Why the owl only appears at night. Long before the moon claimed the sky as its kingdom, long before darkness learned to walk without making a sound, the owl was not a creature of shadows. He was a creature of light. He was a creature of glory. His name was Ekuba, and in the language of the village of Amakoye, that ancient village nestled between the great forest of Olumba and the silver river the elders called Nyankoyo, the name Ekuba did not simply mean owl. It meant, the one whom the sun chose to honor. Remember that name. Ekuba. Say it slowly if you must. Let it sit on your tongue like honey before the bees have taken it away. Because this is a name that once rang through the forest canopy like a bell, a name that made other birds fall silent when they heard it, a name that made the morning air itself seem to stand straighter. And it is a name that, by the time this story ends, will carry a very different weight. But let us begin where all good stories must begin. At the beginning, when the world was still young enough to be surprised by the choices of its creatures, and wise enough to remember them forever. Amakoye was not the largest village in the land, but it was perhaps the most alive. The people of Amakoye believed, as their fathers and their fathers' fathers had believed, that everything in the world was connected by invisible threads, threads as fine as the web of the spider but stronger than the roots of the oldest tree. They called these threads Amuliro, the living breath, and they said that the Amuliro ran through the soil, through the water, through the wind, through every creature, through every person, and most powerfully of all, through the great spirits, the ones who lived in the mountain, in the river, in the sky, and in the space between the stars. The elders of Amakoye were not simply old people. They were keepers of the threads. When the Amuliro trembled, when something disturbed the balance of the living world, it was the elders who felt it first, the way an old fisherman feels a storm before the clouds arrive, something in the air, something in the bones, something that has no name but cannot be ignored. And so the village of Amakoye lived carefully. They gave thanks before they ate. They asked permission before they felled a tree. They never crossed the river at night without speaking the names of the river spirits first. They never raised their voices in anger at the forest, for the forest remembered everything that was spoken within its shadows. Among the creatures of Amakoye, there was one who was admired above all others. Ekuba, the owl. But the owl who lived in the time of this story was nothing like the creature you have seen blinking from a branch in the cold hours before dawn. No. This owl was something else entirely. This owl was built from light. His feathers were the color of sunrise, deep amber at the roots, brightening to gold, then to white at the very tips, so that when he spread his wings in the morning, it looked as though the sun itself had grown feathers and decided to fly. His eyes, too, were extraordinary. Not the pale yellow circles you see in the darkness today, but deep, burning amber. Two small fires that seemed to contain within them every flame that had ever lit the night. When Ekuba looked at you, you felt seen. Truly seen. The way you feel when you speak a secret aloud and realize, too late, that someone was listening. Ekuba was also gifted with a voice. Not the haunting, hollow hoot you hear on dark nights. No, not yet. In those days, Ekuba's voice was clear and resonant and full, like the sound of a great drum heard across still water. When Ekuba spoke, and he did not often speak, for in those days he understood instinctively the power of silence, the forest grew quiet. The monkeys stopped chattering. The crickets paused their song. Even the river seemed to slow, as though the current wished to hear what the owl had to say. He was the messenger of the sun. That was his gift. That was his role. That was the sacred thread of Amuliro that ran through him and connected him to the great order of things. Each morning, before the sun climbed fully above the horizon, Ekuba would fly to the edge of the eastern forest, to the place the people of Amakoye called Walubengo, the threshold, and he would call out in his deep, beautiful voice, announcing the arrival of the day. And the day would come. The people of Amakoye said that without Ekuba's morning call, the sun might forget where to go. They said this not as poetry, but as truth. For the thread of Omuliro that connected the owl to the sun was one of the oldest and most delicate threads in the world. And old threads, when broken, do not simply unravel quietly. They unravel everything around them. In those good days, the days before the trouble, Ekuba was joyful in a way that only those who are truly gifted can understand. He flew through the morning forest as though the air itself was celebrating him. He visited the hummingbirds in the upper canopy, and the hornbills in the middle branches, and the weaver birds at the forest edge, and all of them greeted him with the particular deference one gives to someone who is genuinely excellent at the thing they were born to do. The other birds did not resent Ekuba. Not then. Resentment requires the belief that something has been taken from you. In those days, nothing had been taken from anyone. Ekuba's greatness did not diminish their own. The hornbill still had his magnificent beak. The crane still had his elegant stride. The sunbird still had his jeweled throat. Ekuba simply had something more, and for a while, at least, he wore it gracefully. He would spend his afternoons perched on the great fig tree at the center of the village, the one the elders called Omutoma, the tree that holds the memory, and the children of Amakoye would gather below, not demanding anything from him but simply happy to sit in his shadow, as though nearness to something beautiful was itself a kind of nourishment. The elders, though, watched Ekuba with quieter eyes. The oldest of them, a woman named Nalongo, whose hair had long since turned to the color of ash and whose voice carried the weight of many seasons, would sometimes look at the owl from the doorway of her hut and say nothing. When the children asked her what she was thinking, she would say only, "A vessel that knows it is beautiful will one day try to pour itself into something larger than it can hold." The children did not understand. They were children. They were not meant to understand. Not yet. Understanding of that kind is not taught. It is given, slowly, by time and by consequence, by the particular pain of learning that you are not, after all, what you imagined yourself to be. Ekuba would have understood, if he had been listening. But Ekuba, in those days, was beginning to hear only the sound of his own excellence. And that sound, once it fills your ears, leaves very little room for anything else. It was in the dry season, when the grass turned golden and the dust rose in soft clouds from the feet of cattle, that the great summons came. Not a summons to a meeting of elders. Not a summons to a ceremony. A summons from Enyambi. Enyambi, the great sun, the one who lives at the top of the sky, the one whose eye opens the world each morning and closes it each evening, had sent a message through the Omuliro, through the invisible threads of living breath that connect all things. The message was felt by Nalongo first, like heat before fire. She sat up in the night and held very still, and she understood what she felt. The great sun wished to share a secret. Not just any secret. The oldest secret in the world. The secret of the first light. How it was made, what it contained, why it would one day be taken back if the world did not prove itself worthy of keeping it. This secret had been sealed away at the beginning of time in a vessel made of pure starfire, and Enyambi had decided that the time had come to entrust it to one worthy creature, a guardian who would carry the knowledge of the first light through the ages and pass it, when the time came, to those who needed it most. And Enyambi had chosen Ekuba. When Nalongo told Ekuba this at sunrise, the owl's eyes blazed with a fire so bright that the old woman took a small step backward. "I have been chosen," said Ekuba, and his voice, that deep, resonant, beautiful voice, rang through the morning air like a stone dropped into a well, going down and down and down. "You have been chosen," Nalongo said carefully. "But let me tell you the conditions that Enyambi has set." Ekuba was already spreading his wings, already turning toward the east, already imagining the journey, already imagining himself arriving, already imagining the weight of the first light's secret settling into his chest like a stone of pure gold. "Ekuba," Nalongo said again. "The conditions." The owl turned back. Slowly. And even in that slowness there was something that made the old woman's heart sink. Not the slowness of respect, but the slowness of one who is doing you a favor by listening at all. "There is only one condition," Nalongo said. "When Anyambi calls you to the top of the sky, you must go at the appointed time, at the 3rd hour of morning, before the sun has fully risen, while the sky still wears its pre-dawn gray. You must go humbly. You must arrive with your wings folded and your eyes cast down. And you must not, under any condition, look directly at Anyambi until he gives you permission to lift your gaze." She paused. "That is the condition of the first light. That is the way the secret must be received. With humility. With patience. With the understanding that even the most gifted vessel is still just a vessel, and it is what is poured into the vessel that matters." Ekuba listened. He heard every word. And then he said, "I understand, Elder. I will do as you say." Nalongo looked at him for a long time. She looked at him the way you look at a path in the forest when you are not sure whether what you are seeing is shadow or smoke. Then she nodded, and she went back inside her hut, and she did not sleep for the rest of that night. The other birds heard about the summons, of course. News in a forest travels on the wind, and the wind spares no one. The hornbill said it was a great honor and that Ekuba had always been destined for something exceptional. The crane said nothing, only lifted one elegant leg and looked away. The weaver birds chattered amongst themselves for most of the afternoon, building and unbuilding their interpretations of what it all meant. But it was the crow, old, black-feathered, unremarkable Kagwa, who said the thing that nobody else dared say. "I hope," said Kagwa, his voice dry as a riverbed in August, "that Ekuba remembers that the sun does not shine brighter because of who admires it." Nobody replied. But everybody heard. On the night before the appointed hour, Ekuba could not be still. He flew from tree to tree across the great forest of Olumba, restless as a river after the first rains. The stars were out in great abundance that night, more stars than usual, or so it seemed, as though the sky itself was watching, curious to see what the golden owl would do with the gift he had been offered. As he flew, Ekuba thought. He thought about the secret of the first light. He thought about what it would mean to carry it. He thought about how the other birds would look at him when he returned, not just with admiration but with awe, the deeper, quieter, more permanent cousin of admiration. He thought about how the people of Amakoye would speak of him in the seasons to come, how Nalongo herself would bow her silver head in recognition of what he had become. He thought, in short, about himself. And the more he thought, the more a small, insistent voice began to whisper something in the quiet chambers of his magnificent mind. The voice said, "Why wait for the appointed hour? Why go in the pre-dawn gray, with wings folded and eyes cast down, like a supplicant? You are Ekuba. You are the one whom the sun chose. You are the one the great sun needs as his messenger. Perhaps, the condition is simply a formality, a test of whether you are the kind of bird who can be made to wait. And surely Anyambi already knows that you are not the kind of bird who needs to be tested." Perhaps, the voice whispered, going at noon, at the highest point of the sun's journey, when you would arrive blazing with full light, your feathers burning gold against the golden sky, perhaps that would be the true act of a worthy messenger. Not a quiet, humble arrival in the gray pre-dawn, but a glorious entrance at the height of the world's brightness. Ekuba sat on a high branch and looked at the eastern horizon for a long time. He thought of Nalongo's words. He thought of the condition. He thought of Kagwa's dry voice saying, "The sun does not shine brighter because of who admires it." Then he thought of himself arriving at noon, wings spread wide, the whole forest watching from below, the whole sky open above. And the small voice inside him grew larger, and larger, and larger still, until it was the only sound left. When the 3rd hour of the morning came, the appointed hour, the branch where Ekuba had been sitting was empty. He had gone ahead, but not in the pre-dawn gray. He had gone at noon. There are moments in the life of any creature, any person, when the world holds its breath. This was one of those moments. The people of Amakoye noticed it first. At midday, when the sun was highest, the air grew very still. The cattle stopped moving. The children at the river stopped splashing. A silence settled over the village of Amakoye that was not the silence of peace but the silence of waiting, the silence of a world about to flinch. Nalongo came out of her hut. She looked at the sky. She looked for a long time. Then she sat down on the ground, right there in the dust outside her door, and she put her face in her hands. She did not weep. She was too old and too knowing for weeping. But the sound that came from her was quiet and low, the sound of someone who has seen the thing they feared most confirmed. High above, higher than the forest, higher than the clouds, higher than the place where eagles go when they are trying to remember what the world used to look like, Ekuba arrived at the dwelling of Enyambi. He arrived at noon. He arrived with his wings spread wide. He arrived with his amber eyes lifted upward, already searching for the face of the great sun, already preparing to receive, already burning with the certainty of his own worthiness. Enyambi was immense, not just in size, in presence, in age, in the particular kind of authority that belongs to things that existed before the world had words for them. Standing before Enyambi was like standing before a mountain that could also see you, a mountain that had been watching you for your entire life and had waited patiently for this moment to show you how small you were by comparison. And Ekuba, for the first time in his long, magnificent, admired life, felt small. The great sun said nothing at first. He only looked. And his looking was like sunlight concentrated through glass, warm on the surface, burning underneath. Then Enyambi spoke. And his voice was not like thunder, as the story said. It was quieter than that. Much quieter. Which somehow made it more devastating. You did not come at the appointed hour, said the great sun. Ekuba opened his beak. He had prepared words. Many words. About worthiness, about the noon arrival being a tribute, about the pre-dawn hour being insufficient for someone of his particular luminosity, about how surely Enyambi would agree, once he heard the reasoning, that you did not come humbly, said the great sun. The words died in Ekuba's throat like sparks in the rain. You did not come with your wings folded. You did not come with your eyes cast down. You came blazing. You came as though you were arriving to receive what was yours by right, rather than what was offered to you as a gift. And a gift refused by the conditions of its offering is not a gift received at all. Ekuba said nothing. For the first time in his life, the resonant, deep, beautiful voice produced no sound. I chose you, said Enyambi, because you are gifted. Because your voice announces my coming each morning with grace and clarity. Because in you there is something true and bright. But I see now that the brightness in you has become confused. You believe the brightness is you. You have forgotten that I am the source, and you are only ever the reflection. A reflection that believes it is the light is a very dangerous thing. Not for me. For itself. The great sun was silent for a moment. Then, I will not give you the secret of the first light. That gift must find another vessel, one that knows it is a vessel. Ekuba's heart lurched like a stone dropped from a great height. But there is more, said Enyambi. Because you have come to me at noon, at the highest hour of my heat, with your eyes open and your wings spread. You have looked upon what no living creature was ever meant to look upon directly. You have looked upon the full face of the first light. And there is a consequence for that which even I cannot undo. Ekuba felt it before he understood it. A burning. Not the warm, comfortable burning of being admired. A deeper burning. As though something was being taken away. Not quickly, not cruelly, but with the patient, inevitable thoroughness of the tide going out. He felt it in his feathers first. The golden sunrise amber at the roots. The brightening gold. The white at the very tips. He felt them changing, darkening, muting, pulling back from the light like a plant that has been told it no longer belongs in the sun. The amber became brown. The gold became gray-brown. The brilliant white tips became the mottled, dappled brown and cream of bark, of shadow, of forest floor. His eyes, those two amber fires, went pale. Not dark. Pale, wide, circular, rinsed of their warm burning color, and left with only the cool, luminous yellow of something that can see in the dark but has forgotten how to see in the light. From this day forward, said the great sun, his voice not angry but heavy with the sorrow of consequence, you cannot bear my light. You have looked at me without permission, and now my light is too much for you to endure. You will fly only when I am absent. You will call only when I am sleeping. You will be a creature of the night, not as punishment, but as protection. Because the eyes that have looked upon the first light without humility can never again tolerate the ordinary light of the world without pain. The secret will be given to those who come humbly, in the gray pre-dawn, with wings folded and eyes cast down. And you will spend your nights looking for that secret in the dark, calling for it, listening for it, searching every shadow. But you will never find it. Because the secret of the first light cannot be found in the darkness. It can only be received in the gray humility of the early morning, by those who know the difference between being chosen and being worthy. Ekuba returned to the forest. He did not return to the great fig tree at the center of the village. He returned to the deep forest, to the oldest, darkest part of Olumba, where the canopy was so thick that even at midday the light came through only in thin, scattered coins of gold. He found a hollow in the oldest tree in the forest, a tree so old that no one in Amakoye could remember a time when it had not stood there, and he climbed inside. He sat in the dark for a long time. He sat until the sun set. And when the sun set and the first stars appeared and the world grew dim and blue and quiet, he discovered something. In the darkness he could see. Not just see. See everything. See the mouse moving through the grass 30 meters away. See the droplets of evening dew forming on the tip of each leaf. See the path of a moth through the air, as though it were leaving a bright trail. The darkness, which had always seemed to him a kind of absence, a kind of nothing, was in fact full, impossibly, breathtakingly full, of a different kind of seeing. He spread his changed wings, brown now, mottled, quiet, not the wings of something that announces itself, but the wings of something that moves through the world without disturbing it, and he lifted off into the night. And he discovered something else. In the darkness, his voice carried differently. The deep resonance was gone. But what replaced it was something older, stranger, more haunting, a sound that did not announce but inquired, that did not proclaim but asked. A sound that started in the chest and moved upward through the throat and emerged into the night air not as a call of triumph but as a question. Who? 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 The people of Amakoye heard it on the first night, and they shivered. Not in fear, not exactly. In recognition. The way you shiver when you hear a song you once knew and have almost forgotten. They recognized the voice. Changed as it was, broken as it was, haunted as it was, They recognized it as Ekuba's. Nalongo heard it from her hut, and she turned toward the sound, and she said, quietly, into the darkness, "He is asking the right questions now. It is only a pity that it took losing the answer to learn how to ask." The children of Amakoye came to their parents that night and asked, "Why does the owl call like that? Why does he sound like he is looking for something?" And the parents, drawing from something older than memory, said, "Because he is. He is looking for what he lost. And he will look for it every night, for as long as there are owls in the world." In the seasons that followed, the people of Amakoye learned to read the owl's voice as they had once learned to read the weather, as information, as counsel, as a sign from the world they could not see to the world they lived in. When Ekuba hooted 3 times in quick succession and fell silent, the elders said it meant rain before morning. When he called from the south side of the village, they said it meant a visitor was coming. When he was silent for many nights in a row, they said it meant the forest itself was listening for something, and that people should walk carefully and speak softly. And when anyone asked why the owl always hid from daylight, retreating into his hollow the moment the sky began to lighten, folding his brown dappled wings around himself like a man who cannot look at something he once loved, Nalongo would say, "Because the sun and the owl once had an agreement, and the owl broke it. And now the light that he once called forward each morning is the same light that he can no longer endure. That is the nature of the gifts we misuse. They do not simply leave us. They become the thing we cannot face." And so it is that even today, when the sun goes down and the great darkness settles over the world like a careful hand over a flame, you will hear the owl. You will hear him before you see him, if you see him at all. You will hear that hollow questioning call moving through the dark air. Who? 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 And if you are still enough and quiet enough and honest enough with yourself, you will understand what he is asking. He is not asking who is there. He is asking who he was. He is asking who he could have been, if he had arrived at the appointed hour, in the gray pre-dawn, with wings folded and eyes cast down. He is asking what the first light felt like, the light he was so close to receiving that he could already feel its weight in his chest, only to lose it in the moment of his greatest certainty. The elders of Amakoye say that there is a lesson in every creature, if you know how to read it. And the lesson of the owl is this: pride is not a noise. Pride is a silence. It is the silence inside you where other voices used to be, the voice of the elder you stopped listening to, the voice of the condition you decided did not apply to you, the voice of the world trying to tell you that gifts are not the same as greatness. And by the time that silence is filled again, it is usually filled with the sound of what you have lost. Ekuba was the most gifted creature in the forest. He was not, in the end, the most wise. And so he flies at night, searching the darkness for the secret that lives in the dawn. He can see everything in the dark. He can hear everything in the silence. But the one thing he cannot find, the one thing that hides from him in every shadow, behind every tree, in every hollow silence between his calls, is the thing he threw away at noon, at the top of the sky, with his wings spread wide and his eyes open and his whole golden, beautiful, terrible certainty burning like a second sun. Listen, now. The next time you are sitting outside and the night is full and the stars are out and you hear that sound, that deep, hollow, questioning call drifting toward you from somewhere in the dark, do not be afraid. Be grateful. Be grateful that the owl is still out there, still asking, still searching, still reminding the world that the gifts we are given come with a particular kind of responsibility. The responsibility of knowing that we did not create the light. We were only ever asked to carry it. And the carrying is a gift. And the gift has conditions. And the conditions are not obstacles. They are the lesson itself. This is the story of Ekuba, the owl who lost the light. This is why the owl comes only when the sun has gone. This is why he calls into the dark with that sound that is both a statement and a question, a grief and a wisdom, a loss and a learning. And this, if you are still, if you are listening, if you have arrived humbly at the edge of the story with your wings folded and your eyes ready to see something true, this is also the story of every gift you have ever been given, and every condition you have ever refused, and every morning you still have time to arrive differently.